What is going on, everybody? I am competing in a big cEDH tournament this weekend, and I really wanted to show you guys the deck list that I'm bringing because it is a spicy new one from Outlaws of Thunder Junction. Let's go! What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to my channel. I'm Roxora, and here we do all things card games. Again, we have a special kind of edition of like my commander decks as it's more of almost kind of like a tournament preamble, as I'm recording this the day before the tournament, and we'll probably make a video if it goes well talking about it afterwards, or just kind of talking more about the deck that I am going to showcase here. But yeah, I'm going to be competing in the Solfest 10K main event. Again, I don't want to release this deck list before because I don't want to again like let people know or like publicize exactly what deck I'm bringing. Yeah, I've been very careful about like not posting it anywhere and doing stuff. Obviously still talking with people about it as I'll get to. But yeah, competing in this event, very excited to compete. A lot of my local players that I play with are also competing in this event. So yeah, it should be a lot of fun. They got a bunch of other events going on that weekend as well. It's right here in Orlando, which is nice. Don't have to travel anywhere like I've done for other events. So yeah. But yeah, Outlaws of Thunder Junction is going to be legal for this event. So once I found that out, I was pretty excited because I've been experimenting with the brand new commander, Stella Lee wildcard, which is a precon commander. Again, everyone's been freaking out about that and like freaking out about how this card, is taking over the game, and it's from a precon deck, and not realizing that a lot of powerful commander cards come from precon decks. Dockside Extortionist, all the partner cards, like all of these things come from precon. Fierce Guardianship, Deflecting Swap, those came from precon. So like, I'm not really surprised that a powerful card came from a precon, but I do think it's really cool what this card can do. If you are familiar with my deck choices or my deck my archetype tendencies, you will not be surprised to see that I am gravitating towards Stella Lee. But I genuinely think that this deck is really strong, and there's a lot of reasons to play it, as we'll talk about. Before I show off my actual deck list, it would really do me a solid if you would like, comment, subscribe if you enjoy this content. Again, I engage with cEDH pretty much on a weekly basis, almost every day. Competing and talking about cEDH. So if that's something that you want more of me, I'm happy to do it. Again, I just kind of want to know what kind of content people really on like that are watching my videos want to see from my channel. And also, again, I'm showing off my list. I'm kind of helping y'all out, and so if you again are interested in Stella, you got a little bit of stuff from that. I would really appreciate some of that support. So all right, without further ado, here is the list. So first of all, actually, sorry, apologies here. Let's go back and talk about Stella Lee wildcard here. One blue red. So you'll notice again, if you're familiar with my other videos, basically the same cost as Vadrik, Astral Archmage, one of my other popular decks. Legendary Creature Human Rogue 2/4. That 4 stat line is really nice, can't be bolted. It does a really good job of blocking. It says whenever you cast your second spell each turn, so note each turn, exile the top card of your library. Until the end of your next turn, you may play that card. So right off the bat, every time, it's kind of the anti-Crom effect. Every time you play your second spell, you kind of get an extra card. It is not drawing, so it doesn't trigger off of Bowmasters. There's a lot of things that this first ability does that is really nice. And yeah, note that it is each turn, so you can cast 2 spells on your opponent's turn and get extra triggers off of this, or multiple triggers per turn cycle, which is really awesome if you can enable that. And then it has this really awesome second ability, which is really what we're trying to enable here, of tap, copy target instant or sorcery spell you control. You may choose new targets for the copy, activate only if you've cast 3 or more spells this turn. So that's very important, as again, otherwise it can't use the tap ability unless you've played 3 or more spells. Doesn't mean resolved 3 or more spells, it just means cast, and then we'll get to that as well. But yeah, initially when I looked at this card, I was like, okay, I understand the first ability, I understand the third ability, but I don't really understand how they work together. But they actually work really well together. Again, as casting 3 spells in a turn is pretty difficult. So once you get to that second threshold, that second spell threshold, hopefully Stella will give you a card off the top to cast your third spell, or again, you'll kind of be refunded for playing some cheap cards to enable Stella, and you can kind of just keep the cards flowing as long as you keep Stella on the battlefield. Now, all of that is nice, and you could kind of just play this as a Spellslinger commander as the precon is kind of built. But actually, it goes even further when you realize the combo potential of that second ability. So what we have here is an is it spells deck. It's no surprise, but we're kind of doing a little bit of a combo finish here with a lot of untap effects. So one of the biggest ones in Cerulean Wisps being the cheapest and kind of most efficient to play. Right. Obviously, we don't care about the part about making it blue, but it untaps Stella and draws a card. And so if you are to cast 3 spells, one of them being Cerulean Wisps, you can tap Stella, target Cerulean Wisps, excuse me, it's hard to say, Cerulean Wisps, make a copy of it, and then you can have that copy again target Stella, untapping her. When the copy resolves, you've drawn a card, and now you can once again tap Stella to copy Cerulean Wisps, and you can do this over and over and over and over, and you can essentially draw your deck. And as we know in the cEDH space, drawing your deck pretty much results in winning the game, as long as you are running some ways of some form of fast mana and some form of win condition, right? So we have a couple of ways of winning the game. As I'll talk about, but yeah, that's essentially what this deck is trying to do. It has a bunch of untap effects like Cerulean Wisps, Dramatic Reversal. People might be familiar with that card. This is essentially Isochron Scepter on a stick. We'll talk about why Isochron is not in this list in a moment. But yeah, that's essentially what this deck is trying to do. So we'll go down the list here. So. First of all, how does the deck win? Let's say, okay, you've done the thing. How do you've got your deck in your hand? How do you win the game? So the first off is the spiciest thing about this deck in Twisted Fealty, which is a treason effect, right? Gaining control of a creature and untapping it, giving it haste. And you might ask, well, how the heck does that win the game? We have this clause at the bottom here of making a wicked roll attached to one target creature, which is an aura that when it's put into the graveyard, each opponent loses 1 life, and each creature, if you're not familiar with, can only hold 1 roll at a time. So when Stella Lee copies Twisted Fealty and puts a wicked roll onto it and does it again, the initial wicked roll falls off, and the second one comes back on, and then the graveyard effect of losing 1 life triggers off of the wicked roll. So you can again infinitely make wicked rolls attaching them to Stella, or any creature. Doesn't really matter if it's Stella, right? But doing that, and then eventually, right. The table will die to loss of life. Note that this gets through the One Ring or any kind of protection effect, because it is loss of life and it is not targeted. So it's the best win con of the deck. We really have not found a better win condition. There's another one that costs there's another card that's similar to this that untaps and deals 2 damage, but it costs 6 mana. It's terrible. Right, this is the most efficient, best effect that this deck can do to just win the game once its deck is in its hand. The other ways that we have here are still good, but they require running a few extra pieces. So one being Dualcaster Mage. So Dualcaster Mage plus Twin Flame. We now have an extra effect in Molten Duplication, and of course Heat Shimmer as well. So all of these effects, right? You play them. You play Dualcaster Mage to copy them. You use a copy to target Dualcaster Mage. Dualcaster Mage enters and targets the original. You end up with infinite Dualcaster Mages with haste, as we've established. So that is a pretty neat package. Dualcaster Mage, a good card on its own, by the way, to copy counter spells. Can copy your untap effects. So Dualcaster Mage, again, seems like a dead card in some cases, and again, some people building Stella are not high on Dualcaster Mage. I'm keeping it in here because I really want to have compact win conditions once I have the deck in the hand. Molten Duplication, Heat Shimmer, and Twin Flame also have synergy with the rest of the deck, as you can do things like copy Docksides, obviously, copy your Archmage Emerituses and Spellseekers to get extra ETBs, and they also give haste, so you can actually win on the turn that you play Stella. If you play Stella, make a copy of it, keep the copy with haste, and then cast more spells, right? There is also a way to copy or to kind of use them to combo with Stella by themselves, or kind of instead of untap effects, but that requires some kind of cast trigger like Archmage. I think that's the only card in our deck that really does that. So again, it requires a lot of pieces, but but you could also I'm just saying there's a lot of overlap here in the kind of combo potential, right? So if you have Archmage out, you can cast Molten Duplication, targeting Stella, copy it, right? Make another Stella, keep the Stella with haste, make another copy, right? And you are using the Magecraft ability since you're copying and drawing off of that. So that's another way you can use Molten Duplication. Again, I'm trying to showcase that there's some overlap here in the combo potential. All these cards work really well together, but again, some of these combo lines are more restrictive than others. But the point is, these cards are pretty live cards. All four of them do things. Again, they're not the best cards, but again, I do like them, having them as a win package. And then, of course, it wouldn't be cEDH if we didn't talk about one of the most powerful win conditions in the format, Underworld Breach. You combine that with Lion's Eye Diamond and Brain Freeze. I'm usually not the biggest fan of LED in blue-red decks, even with Breach, as it's not really a card that I'm happy to play early. But in this deck, again, having free spells is really good with Stella. Again, Stella can only copy instants and sorceries, but remember that the 3 spells or the 2 or 3 spells that you can enable Stella's ability with don't have to be instants and sorceries. They can be these free artifacts, cheap spells like Mox Diamond and Jeweled Lotus, and all these things become at least relevant or potentially useful cards, even if they aren't drawn super early. So those Underworld Breach, LED, and Brain Freeze combine to just win the game, mill out your opponents, or just do, allow you to rebuy Twisted Fealty and do the Stella thing anyways. You could win pretty much however you want once you have enabled that. Ironically, I actually think that Brain Freeze is the weakest card out of all of these win conditions. As I was telling you about, Brain Freeze, is cool and it works with Archmage, but besides that, Brain Freeze doesn't really do much besides fill up our graveyard, which is not really something we're excited about doing unless we're breaching. So, Brain Freeze, I've actually contemplated, I've been discussing with people, cutting Underworld Breach, the Underworld Breach combo entirely from the deck. We're leaning away from that for now. Again, Breach is just still such a strong card, and LED, right? You're already running Breach and LED. Those cards are pretty good by themselves in this deck, and so might as well run Brain Freeze just for another win condition. So those are the win conditions. Let's talk about all of the different untap effects that we've got here. So again, as I mentioned, the best one being Cerulean Wisps, as it is the cheapest one. Just draws a card and untaps, draws your deck. The other kind of good effects that I like in this deck, Refocus, it does the same thing, but for 1 mana more. Twitch is really good, as it can untap an artifact, creature, or land, and draws a card, and so this can be used in a variety of ways besides just comboing with Stella. We have the One Ring in this deck, and the One Ring is such a powerful card. Just getting extra activations off of it can be really good. So the fact that Twitch can untap an artifact is sick. And then also making sure that you have enough mana to win the game afterwards is nice. So you kind of untap Stella, and then with your last couple of effects, you untap a land. Which I'll talk about that line in a moment, because we've got also these really random ones in Infuse and Jolt that are might look confusing here, as they're pretty weak cards, right? Again, similar to Twitch, but you do not get the draw until the beginning of the next upkeep. So you might ask the question, well, how the heck do you win the game if you don't actually draw the cards until the next turn? Well, the answer is you just you just win on that turn. You can either Final Fortune or Born Upon a Wind. So the way that you do this is the first cast of Infuse should be on a land or an artifact or some kind of mana source. You make the copy with Stella. The Stella copy targets Stella, right? And you do that combo. You activate based on however many cards you want to draw, whether that's 80 cards, the number of cards in your deck. I don't recommend that, right? But a lot of cards, enough cards that you think you can draw enough pieces to win the game. And then the last copy that you make, instead of copying Stella, will target a land. And so if you do that, and you do this successfully, you'll have all the cards that you need in your hand. Hopefully one of those cards is Born Upon a Wind and Final Fortune. and then you can just cast those and win immediately, basically. Final portion, not immediately, but like, you know what I mean. And you might ask the question, well, okay, but like when people have interaction, right? If they don't interact with Infuse or Jolt, they probably don't have interaction for everything else. But even if they somehow do, you have all of these free spells. You've got things like Force of Will, Pact of Negation, Force of Negation, Fierce Guardianship, Daze. So many we talked about Force of Will, Mind Break, Trap, Misdirection. So many pieces of free interaction, as well as a bunch of cheap interaction like Pact of Negation. And so all of those are really, really good. So Jolt and Infuse are actually some of my favorite effects in this deck. Again, they're not as good as Cerulean Wisp, but I still think it's really cool to win with those effects. We have a couple other untap effects here, and I left them out on purpose. So we've got Hidden Strings, which is a way of actually making infinite mana, and is also a cool card that can be ciphered onto a card, and you can make copies of it. What was I going to say? This does not draw a card, so it doesn't win the game by itself, right? You kind of need either Archmage or the One Ring in order to successfully win with this. But I do like it in the deck, untapping a couple of things. Again, untapping the One Ring, untapping Mana Vault, untapping some things is basically a kind of a weird ritual is nice. And then, right, just again, being that extra untap effect when you have the One Ring to make sure that you can draw your deck and win the game is also super nice. So I have been enjoying Hidden Strings in this deck. Again, even though it doesn't literally win the game, making a bunch of mana is nice. And yeah. The other effects that I like even more because also going to mention Dramatic Reversal. Dramatic Reversal, similar to Hidden Strings, does not make it just does not draw your deck, but does potentially make infinite mana with any of your mana rocks. Does draw your deck with the One Ring, yada yada yada. I was going to mention, why is not Dramatic Reversal, why is Isochron Scepter not in this list? Stella is Isochron Scepter. It is literally the same thing, but cheaper to activate, harder to enable, but cheaper to activate, and so, yeah, it's just so much harder to make Isochron Scepter work, and then in this deck, again, it's just not needed. If you have Isochron Scepter and Stella, it's kind of like redundant pieces, so Isochron Scepter is just not a card that you should be playing in this list, in case any of you who haven't been looking into this deck were wondering. What was I going to mention? So I was going to mention those, and then I want to talk about two really cool untap effects that I think are super sweet. We've got Shore Up as a protection spell, so if you're looking for a protection spell for Stella, this is absolutely amazing. I've had so many games where I play this. I have this on the stack to protect Stella. It's past my third spell, and so my opponents either have to let it resolve, in which case, cool, my Stella has hexproof, you can't target it anymore, or if they have another removal spell and they try to target it again, then I can tap Stella, copy Shore Up, and if they let that copy resolve, right, if they don't have any more removal, then I get to give Stella hexproof before, right, again, all of the removal resolves, and untap it so I can continue the combo. I love this card and what it does. And again, also can still do the combo with Archmage, just like all the other effects, which is still cool. So the fact that it's even can sometimes be a combo piece is insane. But yeah, being able to protect Stella is super, super important. And yeah, the fact that this card gets to do that while continuing your combo is really nice. Yeah, basically just means if I have this card, you better have two pieces of removal, because otherwise you're not killing Stella. Speaking of extra interaction, Tidal Bore looks like the worst card in the world, right? It is 2 mana to untap a creature. To tap or untap a creature. Awesome. But you actually have the Daze clause of returning an island to your hand in order to play it for free instead of paying its mana cost. So again, on the turn where you're trying to win with Stella, right? If you have Stella tapped, attempting to copy one of your twiddle effects, Twitch, Cerulean Winds, right? Those kinds of things. And your opponent has a removal spell or a counter spell. Boom! You Tidal Bore, you return an island to your hand for free, cast this for free. bam, Stella untaps, and you can kind of go over the top of whatever interaction piece they have. This is basically just another total effect or another counter spell in any environment where you need it, and you have Stella out. Super, super cool effect. Again, I just love that Commander can turn a card like this into an all-star. Again, any people that know me from Vajrik, Narset, or any of the other kind of wacky commander-centric decks that I like building and messing around with will not be surprised that I like Stella so much. Just getting to use some of these weird cards that nobody would ever think to use, and getting to use them to great effect in Stella is exactly what I look for in Commander, in cEDH, in Magic in general. So yeah. So those I think are all of the untap effects that I wanted to talk about. I guess I could also talk about Minamo for a moment here. Minamo is an absolute powerhouse in this deck. Obviously, a lot of people in the cEDH space talk about this card and untapping the Wondering with it. This deck can do that as well, but also, again, in this situation where you are attempting to combo with Stella, and you have Stella tapped, right? Stella can kind of function like, again, an extra copy of Tidal Bore, getting to untap your legendary Stella here and go over the top once again. Yeah, super cool note there. So besides, the untap effects, the other ways that we are kind of building around Stella is just cheap spells, free spells, or really, really cheap spells. So obviously we were talking about Tidal Bore, but then we also got things like Misdirection. Misdirection, again, a card that I've added into Vajrik, I've been really, really liking. Just getting to kind of be an extra copy of Force of Will, or just some kind of protection spell, deflecting SWAT kind of thing. So really, really powerful card. Again, I mentioned them, but deflecting SWAT, Fierce Guardianship, free spells are really nice. Daze is again an awkward card late in the game, but early in the game is really powerful as you can counter cheap things, trigger Stella, or on your combo turns, you can actually just counter your own spell and have this as just a free card to cast and just go off there. Mental Misstep, that should be an obvious one. I've got Gutshot here, and a lot of people have been asking me that I should, a lot of people that I've shown this deck have asked me about Gutshot. Gutshot has felt amazing when I've played it. Every time I've done something with it, whether it's, a worst case scenario, right? It's just my second or third spell to do the combo. But at its best, it's killed something like a Ragavan Nimble Pilferer. It's killed Orcus Bowmasters. It can just, kind of do those last couple of points of damage if there's a combat that goes wrong. I know it seems really underpowered for a competitive deck, but again, in Stella, we really want that threshold of cheap spells so that we can enable both of the abilities, and again, really want to hit that 3 spell threshold so that we can do the combo thing. Cataxian Probe, right? Another really powerful card. Lightning Bolt. I love that I get to play Lightning Bolt. One of my favorite cards. Love that guy. And then, besides that, pretty standard stuff. Rite of Flame, Strike It Rich. These are cards that you've seen from Vajrik. Obviously, Dockside is a cheap card that in that it pays for itself because it makes a crap ton of treasures. Yeah, let's talk a little bit about... Oh, sorry, Snap. Snap is essentially a free spell, right? It costs 2 mana, but it refunds you 2 mana. Let's talk about some of the tutors here and some of the other cards surrounding these. The first one I really want to talk about is Personal Tutor, which is a terrible card. Let's just rip the Band-Aid off. This card sucks, but in this deck, it is really good. And again, I love that dynamic. So this, once again, just enables the combo. So this card plus any other spell will go ahead and fetch you Twisted Fealty, right? So you cast Personal Tutor first. You cast any free spell in your deck. Let that be Gutshot, right? Or any other, again, Gataxian Probe, any of these cards. And Stella's ability is going to trigger, and we'll get the card that you put on top with Personal Tutor. Now, most of the time, that's going to be Twisted Fealty. So once again, you can just go for the kill super early in the game, right? All you have to do is cast Stella, the turn afterwards, immediately Personal Tutor, play a card, and then Twisted Fealty. Boom, if no one has interaction, the table is dead. Kaput. I love that dynamic with Personal Tutor. Super nice. You can do the exact same thing with Mystical Tutor, and Mystical Tutor is obviously just an upgraded Personal Tutor, as it can get anything and is an instant. Super nice. Again, yeah. That's just what I mean. Of like when you compare Personal Tutor to Mystical Tutor, it's just a joke. But again, in this case, we kind of get two Mystical Tutors, which is super nice. Mystical Tutor can be used on your opponent's turn, right? So Mystical Tutor during your opponent's turn, you cast it. You put a twiddle effect on top of your deck, like Cerulean Wisps. You cast any free spell, again, like Gut Shot, and boom, you have your Cerulean Wisps off of Stella Lee, and it's castable. So you can just, draw your deck, and then win immediately, or win as soon as it comes back to your turn. Again, super, super powerful for this deck to be able to play at instant speed, and more importantly, win at instant speed, right? Again, that's why you have the Born Upon a Win, that's why you have the Final Fortune. Both of those cards, super good. So I mentioned the Personal Tutor. Gamble is obviously, like, it's a pretty obvious one, as it's just a fantastic card in every red deck, or at least most red decks. I guess I should say there are exceptions, obviously. Merchant Scroll, searching for a blue instant. That can be something like your Cerulean Wisps. It can also be something like Force of Will, right? So these effects are super nice. It's pretty cheap too. I didn't mention Frantic Search. Frantic Search, another good cheap spell. Love that card. Or kind of free spell, a card that pays for itself like Snap. But yeah. I don't think there's any other tutors here. There are some decks running Solve the Equation, but I think Solve the Equation, even though I love it, is a little bit expensive. I prefer that in something like Vadrik or Narset that can kind of cheat the mana cost in some ways. Here, paying 3 mana every time for Solve the Equation doesn't seem great to me. Again, I know it seems like weird where I have Merchant Scroll. The difference between 2 and 3 is pretty significant in my opinion. So, yeah, and then otherwise we have a bunch of the rest of the deck is pretty much, mana cards or interaction. So Phantasmal Image here, a good way to copy Docksides. Ragavan we talked about. Seeming Spirit Guide is fast mana. Jessica's Will is kind of a ritual and draw effect. There's all the same ways. I like this deck because it's kind of the same as Vadrik in that all of the ways that I'm trying to cast Vadrik early are used to cast Stella early. So like Rite of Flame, Strike It Rich. We even still have the notorious Jeweled Amulet. I've been fiddling with that in Vadrik for a little bit. Been pretty happy with it, and here I think it's even better, where the weakness of Jeweled Amulet is it's really bad to top deck late in the game. In Stella, it's just a 0 mana artifact that you can just be like, here's a Jeweled Amulet, here's another spell, boom, you get a Stella trigger, and the card does not feel nearly as bad when you do that with it. So yeah, just playing this on turn 1, getting to cast Stella with it on turn 2 is worth the include in this deck. And yeah, the fact that it's not a dead card later just makes it awesome. We have all the other ways of casting Vadrik early, a bunch of rocks. We also do have, I will note, both Ancient Tomb and City Traders in this deck. City Traders is a recent addition, as just I have so many 2-mana rocks and just want all of the ways to get out fast mana, get out the One Ring early. Anything I can do to kind of accelerate my game plan, I think is worth it. Turn 2 Ristic Study, off of just 2 lands is super nice. So, what else was I going to mention? Wheel of Fortune. Wheel of Fortune is kind of a goes without saying. Flusterstorm. We've talked about all these cards in past videos. We got 1 Pyroblast here. Now, most people might see that in other decks I run Red Blast. Question is why run Pyroblast over Red Blast. In this case, Red Blast is not castable if there is no blue card on the field, whereas Pyroblast is. So a lot of people have opted to Pyroblast in Stella List to just always have a castable card, and a card that you don't want to cast. Like, you can technically cast Red Blast and target Stella, but you don't want to do that, right? You want to target somebody else's thing. In this case, you can also target a Thimage, and it'll go away from the static ability. So like there are positives and negatives to Pyroblast versus Red Blast. Pyroblast being able to be swatted or misdirection to anything doesn't feel great, but again, besides that, there's no real other weaknesses to Pyroblast, and in this case, the advantage of always being castable so that we can make sure that we get to 3 Stella triggers, or sorry, 3 cast for Stella's abilities, I think is worth it. We got Snap, Swan Song, as we talked about here. I think all these other cards are accounted for. All the artifact mana in the world. Of course, Mystic and Ristic. These cards are everywhere. And then I want to talk about a couple of, I guess, like spicy ones and, of spicy cards. And also, I forget if I talked about Thundering Falls on this channel or the Surveil lands. Initially, I was not too high on this card in any of my decks. But one of my local Izzet friends who plays Niv Mizzet Perun tried out this card, really likes it, and has gotten me onto it, and I've been pretty happy with it in Vadrik, in Narset, and in this deck. I'm not saying they need to be put in every deck, but I do think that they should be a consideration. Put them in your deck, try them out. If you don't like them, okay, fine. But the ability to turn a fetch land basically into a card is super nice. It works with Stella's ability as you basically get to scry. Really, it's Surveil, right? But you get to look at your card. If it's a good card that you want to cast, you keep it on the top, and you can flip it off the top with Stella's first ability, right? And that feels really good. If it's a bad card, right, you want to make sure that you get it off the top of your deck, right? So again, if you're flooding on lands, right, you play the Thundering Falls, you can go ahead and put that land directly into the graveyard. It also is really nice in Breach decks. Again, the fact that it surveils into the graveyard is nice. So that's always something to consider. So I've had a lot of people, in the cEDH space go, ooh, it's a tap land, bad. And I think they're really underestimating the usage of this card. Any fetch land that you just play and don't use immediately can turn into a card filtering mechanic. And I just think that's been super helpful. Again, in this deck, Stella's okay doing that. Some turbo decks or some aggressive decks might not want a tap land in their deck. Again, I'm not telling people like what to or what not to put in their decks. I would just strongly recommend considering Thundering Falls. And I would also might add, oh, sorry, by the way, I should have probably said this towards the beginning of the video, right? But this is just my concept. The deck has been out for like 2 weeks, less, I think. So I'm not acting like, oh, this deck is settled, we're done. Actually, I have a couple of cards that I've been taking in and out and considering that I'll talk about. So I don't want to act like that this deck is settled, that this is the perfect 100. There's still so much to explore with this deck. So yeah. The other card that people might be looking at if they saw it and be scoffing or be cringing is a Defense Grid. So Defense Grid, basically turning off interaction for everybody. It says during each player's turn, everyone else's spells cost 3 more to cast. That's super punishing in a game of cEDH. Turning off cards like Force of Will, Fierce Guardianship, and all the free counters if people are tapped out, or if people even aren't tapped out, interacting at all is just becomes super expensive. So a lot of people really don't like this card. And again, my defense to that is in the scenarios where I don't know how else to I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Stupid people play this card early. I've had people play this card on like turn 2 and like go like a Defense Grid pass. That play is terrible. Please never make that play. Right. But in this deck, it's really good as a card to play on the turn that we're trying to win. Right. So you play something like a Rite of Flame. You play your Defense Grid, you trigger Stella, and then people in that moment are forced to interact, right? If they just pass and let the Defense Grid resolve, boom, you can play something like your Cerulean Wisps, and boom, you win the game, and it's really hard for people to interact with you. That is the scenario in which you should be playing Defense Grid. So presumably, right, it's going to be treated like a silence, where your opponents either interact with it, counter it, or lose the game afterwards. So that is really the scenario or the manner in which you should be treating Defense Grid. And this deck needs it, right? This deck is blue-red. We have no way of running silence. It's one of the weaknesses of this deck, where if people draw too many cards and have too much interaction, this deck is going to kind of struggle to keep up. It's really trying to win fast or draw a bunch of cards and then win after acquiring a bunch of counter magic. So yeah, so defense grid, I think, even though people kind of look down on it, and again, I personally am not the biggest fan of this card. I think it's a pretty underwhelming card, very situational, can be clunky, can be a dead card in your hand, right? It is kind of a necessary evil for this deck in that, like, this deck just needs a way of turning off people's interaction, because if you can't do that, then this deck is going to have a hard time winning. I think I talked about everything here. I didn't talk about Moxhammer. Moxhammer's a cool one, cheap artifact, makes mana with Stella. I've been loving that card. Yeah, nothing else going on with this deck. Oh, I have this Prismatic Vista in here. I don't know why I have this Prismatic Vista. I believe this is actually, yeah, I should change this because this is actually Spire Bluff. Yeah, Spire Bluff. Or not Spire Bluff, Spire of Industry. I actually also did consider Spire Bluff Canal, as this deck just like wants untapped lands in the first couple of turns of the game. But again, I'm messing around with the mana base. Mana base is not my favorite thing about this deck. Building a Izzet deck mana base is kind of hard. So there's that. Yeah, I think I talked about everything. Yeah, Finale of Promise. Let's talk like really quick about Finale of Promise. I was skeptical about this card as well. But if you notice, a lot of the untap effects that we have here are instant speed effects, and then we have a couple of good sorceries in our graveyard. Finale of Promise, if you can cast any sorcery from your graveyard and then any untap effect, the way it works is, right, all three of those cards, both of those cards go on the stack at the same time, but they're considered casts. So Finale plus the 2 spells that you cast is 3 spells for Stella. So immediately you can just cast this, cast the 2 cards in your graveyard, and boom, you can do the combo again. So Finale of Promise has been a super good card to kind of follow up to a win attempt, right? You go for the combo with like Wisps or whatever, gets countered, cool. You untap, you Finale of Promise, you do the exact same thing on the next turn. I think that's really powerful. So yeah, I think that's really the only card that uses the graveyard besides Breach. I mean, we have Strike It Rich. That's another positive to this deck as well. Is kind of being okay with like graveyard removal, being around for a little bit, and then obviously you can't win through a Rest in Peace with Twisted Fealty because it doesn't trigger the effect. Excuse me, but you can just remove it somehow. I guess I didn't talk about Psych Rift and some of the other bounce spells. These cards aren't the best in this deck. Psych Rift is not the best in this deck. This deck is not making a crap ton of mana, but it is still good as just a bounce spell. Can bounce anything unconditionally, and I guess like in the end game, if you somehow make infinite mana with Hidden Strings, right, you can just have the mana to bounce the board if there's a pesky card that's interacting with that's preventing you from doing the thing. So like, it's still worth an inclusion in this deck. And then Alchemist Retrieval is just awesome. Getting to bounce your Dockside for 1 mana, or just being an extra copy of Psych Rift. This card has a couple of permanents that it really doesn't want to see on the battlefield. The big one being Curse Totem, turns off Stella's ability. Obviously, Rule of Law effects and things like that are really annoying. And then, yeah, as we're winning the game, an effect like Rest in Peace or any kind of Dothy Voidwalker, any kind of those kinds of effects will be pretty difficult to win through unless they're removed. So it's important to have some of those removal effects. So I think that's all I wanted to talk about in terms of the actual deck. So let's talk about some of the strengths and weaknesses of this deck. Obviously, again, we talked about the weaknesses. Being just an Izzet deck makes the deck building kind of difficult. Being kind of an all-in deck where our commander kind of provides card advantage, but kind of doesn't. I would say it more provides card advantage. What do you call it? Like a barrier where it kind of gives you a little bit back in terms of when you use your cards, so that when you're casting your spells, you don't feel like you're losing too much value, but you will run out of cards if you aren't successful at winning the game, or landing some kind of card advantage like a Ristic or a One Ring. But let's talk about some of the advantages. Is this deck is super fast, right? I and some of the people working on this deck really do relate it to Rogsai, if you're familiar with Rograk, Silas Ren from kind of more meta cEDH decks. If you're a peruser of the meta game, you'll know that deck is a super fast combo deck, very much all in, looking to either land a Ristic Study or just win super fast and kind of not care about interacting. So that's kind of what this deck is trying to do as well, and it does it really well. If you cast Stella on turns 1 or 2, you'll very likely be able to present a win on the next turn. And even in those scenarios where you get interacted with, there's even ways, again, with Crimson Wisps, there's ways of, or any of these Molten Duplication effects, there are ways to win on the turn that you play Stella, which is super impressive. So I think all of these things combine to make this really powerful deck that can just win out of nowhere, or play a mid-range game plan and win at instant speed during an opponent's turn, which can really catch people off guard. So I think all of these things kind of combine to form this really dynamic, really creative deck that I've really been enjoying working with. Again, it's not decided, so I'll kind of talk about some of the considerations down here. Real quick before I kind of close up here, just to kind of bring everything together. Yeah, again, if anyone has any thoughts on cards as well that we might not be thinking of or you haven't seen here, happy to talk about it. But yeah, this is where I'm at right now. This is most likely what I'll be playing in the tournament. Again, I might change a card or two, but this is where I'm at right now, and the tournament is tomorrow, so. But yeah, originally Bergie and Stormkiln were in the deck. As again, you just think, oh, you're a spells deck, you're gonna want to run these. Stormkiln working with Magecraft is nice. But in my playtesting, I actually found that I didn't really need them, and I really just wanted cheaper cards. Stormkiln Artist is pretty expensive, and a lot of the times, if I just drew my deck with something like Cerulean Wisps, I had enough mana to win the game anyways. I didn't really need the treasures from Stormkiln to win the game. So Stormkiln is definitely out of there, and actually Bergie actually left before Stormkiln, as I wasn't really using the back half all that much. It's a pretty expensive effect again, as I said. But yeah, and then this effect, in my opinion, is just weaker than Stormkiln Artists. So Unctus was a new one that I put in for a little bit. Eventually ended up taking out. It performs similarly to Archmage in that the effects that kind of don't draw a card, like Tidal Bore and Shore Up and things like that, actually cause this to loot through the deck. So right, it says blue creatures have, when it becomes tapped, you loot. Right, and so Stella's ability requiring her to tap works really well with this, so you get to loot through your deck until you eventually find, again, an effect that draws a card, like the Cerulean Wisps, and then you draw the rest of your deck. That was the thought process behind this card, and then also just in the mid game, or just being itself, getting to attack with Stella or something like that, and loot if I'm not doing the combo thing sounded interesting, but I think I'm not on this card right now. I think it's just worse than Archmage, and yeah. I did have Snapback in the deck. I do like the card. I think it's really powerful. As I mentioned, free spells are really good. But exiling a blue card from my hand is a pretty taxing effect. Again, as I mentioned, this deck already struggles with card advantage. Having Force of Will, Misdirection, Force of Negation, and Snapback was a lot. And I think I would rather just have Alchemist Retrieval, which can be a bounce spell, but can also but doesn't require a card, and can sometimes just be used to combo. Also, Snapback is only creatures, so Alchemist Retrieval, being able to bounce, again, Curse Totem and things like that, also super nice. Curse Mirror is a card that was meant to just copy Dockside. I wasn't super high on it, and then I realized it can also do kind of like the twin flame effect with Stella, right? You copy Stella with it, and it has haste. Again, I tried it out, wasn't super impressed with it. Again, it is, if you want more ways of copying Dockside, this can do that. I didn't really want it. And then we got a couple of sorceries here. So initially these MDFC cards, the Seagate and Shadow Skull, were in the deck as extra land sources and also extra spells, cards to pitch to Force or Chrome Mox. But in general, I feel like they didn't do enough. Even when I drew Shadow Skull Smashing and could play it, didn't really want to. Never really was in a situation where I drew Seagate Restoration. And so, yeah, I think I just wanted to add an extra land. Again, that land being City of Traders and cut off the mana base there. So yeah, fine cards. They do things, but yeah, just weren't really good enough. And then Claim the Firstborn here is a card that, again, a lot of people have been considering because it gives haste and it does the untap effect with Stella. But again, outside of Archmage, there's no way to actually win with it. So I don't really view it as a combo card. It's more about being a haste enabler. And then, you know, maybe sometimes you steal, some people have talked about stealing Grand Abolisher with this. I don't really know how that's happening because if the Grand Abolisher is on the battlefield, the game's probably over. The game's in a crazy game state. So, yeah, I think Claim the Firstborn can do some things. I'm not super high on it. I'm just sticking with Crimson Wisp right now. There's also the haste spell in Expedite that I've also considered, but again, sticking to just one of those effects right now, and going from there. Yeah, those are the things I was considering. Again, the deck is not finished, but I do want to try it out at this event for a couple of reasons. Number one, again, as I mentioned, just being a new card and a new deck that I'm really enjoying, wanting it to get more data, but also generally think it's really good. I think, again, there is that element of the surprise factor that I had with Vadrik. That effect has essentially lessened as more and more people have seen the deck, more people becoming aware that the deck exists. And Vadrik was a pretty hard deck to make work. Stella is so much easier to enable, and your card quality here is just so much better that I really like how the deck is looking, and I'm excited to see how it performs. Cool. I think that is all I want to say about Stella. Again, open to if you are thinking of cards. Again, I'm sure most of them I've probably thought of, but if you have anything to add to the discussion, you can do so in the comments. Let me know, guys, what you guys think of Stella Lee. Do you think it's awesome? Do you think it's gonna break the meta? Am I gonna run it down, run through the tables at this tournament? Or am I gonna get my ass handed to me? Let me know. And also let me know what you guys are messing around with Thunder Junction cards, any other interesting cards that you guys are messing around with in Commander or cEDH. Let me know. But yeah, that's Stella Lee. Again, I hope I do well, and I hope to come back and tell you about the amazing experience at Saltfest. All right, guys, that's going to do it for me for this video. If you enjoyed, remember, like, comment, subscribe, yada, yada. I feel like a broken record here. But yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video.